Italy is now emerging tentatively from one of Europe's longest and toughest coronavirus lockdowns. Italian Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte on Wednesday presented a new aid package worth about 55 billion euros to cushion the economic impact of the coronavirus pandemic. But how long before the country is getting back on its feet? And what are the challenges ahead? Earlier, I talked to economist Michele Geraci, the former Undersecretary of State at the Italian Ministry of Economic Development. Let's listen in to his views. I know you are in Rome. How is your country dealing with it, the latest situation, both the pandemic and the jobs?
It's a tough situation. We have made the typical mistake of underestimating the health risk, and so we have been acting late, chasing the problem rather than anticipating. And what could have been maybe a lockdown in early February and March done well, and then maybe restart now, is actually now dragging on, and we are now in the middle May with still a partial lockdown and no clear plan to exit. So unfortunately, we are in a both health and even worse now economic situation that needs serious attention.
55 billion, that is the number likely to come out in terms of aid package the government provides. I know there's still a process to go in terms of making it to work through governmental procedures. Professor Geraci, how much is it likely to help, though?
I think this is an initial step, but it's too little, too late. There are many problems. The 55 billion euros is not enough. We need 200 billion euros. Then we also have many political parties involved on deciding where is this 55 going to be spent. And very likely will be broken down into small pieces to make everyone happy. And therefore, when things are distributed, they don't really have the effect that is required. I'll give you an example. Tourism in Italy is only direct value is 100 billion euros. If we look at related industry, it's about 240, roughly 13–14% of the GDP just for tourism. So this is gone. This is like minus 70, minus 80% for the year. So probably we lose 100 billion only from tourism. And the package is 55 billion divided into many sectors. So we need really a stronger and quicker, because even this 55 is not going to be ready tomorrow. It will take weeks and months. And in the meantime, we lose jobs, company close down, and many of them will never restart again.
More and faster, but where does the money come from? 200 billion. Let's just say the price tag, you put it out there. Where will that come from?
This money comes from new bond issues, which is perfectly okay because Italy has good access to the financial market directly without even needing to recur to the European Union assistance, which is also coming late and little and with many conditions. So we have always argued, and I personally argue, that Italy should just finance its own expenditure with its own deficit. Of course, debt to GDP will go to 160%, 160 this year, and probably 170 the one after. So we are getting into very high situation, but c'est la vie. This is the situation. It's quicker and more effective to issue bonds directly as Italian government bonds rather than European bonds.
So now we will have to wait and see how things would evolve, right? About that 55 billion euro and whether they are likely to work.
We have to wait and see, but unfortunately, and this is what I'm trying to, the battle that I'm trying to fight every day is to try to persuade Mr. Gualtieri and other members in the government, Mr. Conte, to really act soon, because wait and see is not a luxury that we have now. We did, remember, on January 31st, we declared health emergency in the whole country for 6 months. And we still, after 4 months, we don't even have the masks. We don't even know where we should wear them or not. So we have really wasted time despite the announcement, despite being in health emergency, which has never happened in Italy in the last several decades. Words have not been followed by actions. And now we are stuck in the middle. Companies want to reopen, of course, because the economic situation is in danger, but the health situation is not being solved yet.
Yeah.
And now there is the fear of re-emergence of cases if the reopening is not done well. We don't even have decided whether we should use a contact tracing app.
Right.
Again, after 4 months of discussion, we don't even know if it's okay, if it's a privacy issue, if we should look at China, Korea, Israel model. So really, we are in a situation of fluid, let's call it.
Okay. Two necessities. One is masks, the other is tests. Usually when we do not have 100% certainty about how situations are, these are crucial tools for economies to realize whether it's the right moment to open up and to what degree. Beautifully said, Professor Geraci. Having said that, though, what about Italy's interaction with the EU? Now, there have been earlier self-confessed by the EU leaders regarding whether they have been providing sufficient support to the member countries, and they apologize for that to a certain degree. But what about the situation now from an economist's perspective?
I tell you, leaving aside the politics, from an economic perspective, the EU has no money, has no real budget. It's only very, few billion. That is not what we need. So the only thing the EU can do is to get itself in the middle between countries and the financial market and try to maybe issue bonds at a better yield than countries would do individually. But the European Union itself does not have money to give it to people. The only thing that can be done at the EU level is the European Central Bank. They have the money, they can print it, and they can purchase the bonds that each member state issue, and therefore helping the cost and yield of those bonds. But I'm really very skeptical about any EU rescue plan, because we have internal divisions. The 19 members of the Eurozone have different goals, different stages of pandemic, different stages of economic crisis. There is really no solidarity between EU members, because let's not remember, we are 27 countries, different languages. We are not one country, and therefore I'm very skeptical about this help. I've even told members in the Italian government, do not really waste time to go to Brussels anymore. Let's just do the things our own here and ourselves in a more effective and quicker way.
Professor Geraci, as an economist, let me ask you about that regarding the economy in the EU as a whole. Now, we see different economies really are at very different stages of this pandemic. So how would this entity work, and how would each other provide both market and products for one another? That is probably one thing needs to be urgently figured out. Professor.
You're right, and I believe, again, you said I'm very straightforward. China will be the relative winner. We had the minus 6.8% GDP, 1 quarter. Many Western media have made a big fuss of it because it's the first time in 40 years. So what? China will have an investment plan and will do what is needed to restart the economy. And the same for Korea and other Asian countries. Similarly, the United Kingdom, perhaps the United States, the main problem is within the core of the Central and Southern European, because, when we have different stages of restarting, of reopening, and borders open, we will have returnees and, imported contagion situations. So either we limit or monitor the borders, or otherwise the flow of people that we have seen recently will not happen as it used to be. Now, this is not necessarily bad news per se, because goods can continue to travel without people traveling. But more positively, I think we will see development of the software and digital industry. That is easy to transfer between one country and the other one. It does not require physical shipment, and definitely does not require people's movement. So I see a world where we have some countries winning, China, Korea, the United Kingdom, some countries lagging behind like Southern Europe, and travel industry will have serious problems, of course, but digital will develop. And this is where I think we in Italy and the countries that suffer economic losses, we should concentrate to develop and put some of the money on the development of this industry. But none of this 55 billion or very little, is aimed at that, because it's mostly aimed at rescuing existing industries rather than developing the new one. And this is yet another problem the country faces. They need to focus on mitigating the effect, or be forward-looking and try to invest into new sectors. Otherwise, we will have the problem in 2-3 years' time.
Yeah. But on the other hand, you think about the new technologies, wonderful growth potential as you illustrated. However, on the other hand, we do not want to forget there's also the issue, the backdrop of not just pandemic, but geopolitics, which existed before the pandemic. And 5G becomes such a sensitive word, and yet it should be a word that should be celebrated by the world. So, Professor Geraci, you know this. You work in the ministry. You know how geopolitics comes into policies too. So how does that work, do you think, at this moment?
So I am positive about this. I think once November comes with the United States election behind, I think the attitude between the US and China will tone down a little bit, and we will not reach the very healthy and nice relationship from many years ago, because now we have raised the bar. There will be a new normal also for China-EU relationship, but at a lower and more stable level than we see now, which is a little bit erratic. And I'm positive. As you mentioned, I work on trade, and I see the attitude of Mr. Lighthizer and Vice Premier Liu He. I think they are working, as technical people behind, and in a more effective way than maybe President Trump would like to show. So I'm positive this tension will go down. Now, technology is an issue, but it doesn't have to be just the 5G. For example, I used to teach in university. Online learning, remote diagnosis for medicine can actually reach parts of the world poor in Asia and in Africa and even in Latin America and even in Europe that otherwise would have not been reached. So technology is not just bad because of spying and whatever can be done with 5G, but it needs to be put at the use of the common people, like we did for the internet, like we're doing for learning, I said medicine, and many other sectors. And I think this is a good way to diffuse the tensions. So I know every time we say 5G, people get excited. That's why I don't even mention it anymore. I just talk about what we do with it without saying how. People don't care if it's 3, 4, or 5G. They need to know what is it that we do with it. And I think if we focus on the benefits, people will relax a little bit.
Yep. My final question, Professor Geraci, I know you're an economist, you work in the Ministry of Trade, but I still want to ask you about this, what about this cross-Atlantic relations? Now we see during the time of pandemic, countries have to focus on their own priorities. Of course, they also need to focus together of the common interests, for example, vaccines, saving lives, things like that. So at this critical moment, what are some of the sensors you have regarding Europe as a whole, or some of the economies on the European continent? How do they look at their relationship across the Atlantic and also their own blueprint for the future?
The relationship, despite the perceived unity of the European Union, the problem is that the European Union has really no legal standing to do foreign policy. So despite you see trade, of course is done at EU level, but foreign policy is not. And so foreign policy falls back into the responsibilities of individual member states.
Yes.
And therefore, everyone does what they think is right. The UK may have a special relationship, so with Germany, so with Italy. We do all have a good relation with the United States, but then the terms of engagement are very different. I've been dealing a lot with the relation between Italy and China. I did, of course, look at the relation between Brussels and China, but clearly the most effective way to deal, negotiate, and establish relationship is a bilateral, not at the regional level. Because Chinese policymakers and government, if I may, yes, they do look at Brussels when it comes to trade, tariffs, but when it comes to the foreign relationship, foreign policy relationship, personal relationship, they do go to individual countries as they should. So I will see a fragmentation within Europe of the relationship with the United States. some stronger, some weaker, but that's a different thing from doing the interest of our own economies, which is the duty of every government.
Yes, indeed. Michele Geraci, the former Undersecretary of the Italian Ministry of Economic Development. Always a pleasure, Professor Geraci. Be well and be safe, please.